So for the last 4 years, I have been a history teacher. And 2 weeks ago, I was introducing a lesson to my class when I offhandedly mentioned that the formal study of history is merely an intellectual exercise. It's of little pragmatic value to us today. The minute that I said this, my class erupted in defiant chatter. Mr. Aguilar, how can you say that? The study of history allows us to learn from our mistakes. Yeah, Mr. Aguilar, the study of history gives us a better understanding of the world around us. Amongst all the incredulous looks that I received and the questions of, why do you even teach history anyway? One student in the back of my class yelled out, actually, he's right. And at that moment, every single person in my class turned their attention to this student as he rifled through his book bag. And he pulled out a book. He pulled out Michael Lewis's The Undoing Project. And he began to explain to the rest of my students that historical interpretation suffers from a cognitive bias, where history isn't actually what happens. It's what we say happens. It's our perception of it. To a point where we start creating a false reality of past events that actually warps our perception of the future. Most of my students couldn't understand this abstract explanation because they're not independent thinkers. They're not Mavericks. Formal education has effectively stripped them of their autonomy. Mavericks are able to see the world from a multitude of different lenses. They don't have to be told how to think about something, and they definitely don't need to be told how to learn. Because deeply embedded in the fabric of our society is this idea that you have to wait for wisdom to be passed to you by some parent, mentor, or teacher. And this is simply not the case. If you look at all the great visionaries in recent memory, you come to find out that the one thing that made them special, the thing that allowed them to be pioneers in their respective fields, they didn't learn it within the four walls of a classroom. They're the ultimate autodidacts. They taught themselves. Nobody taught Chance the Rapper how to achieve mainstream success in the music industry without selling out to a record label. Nobody taught Angela Merkel how to navigate the 2008 financial crisis in Europe and rise to be the most powerful woman on the planet today. And nobody taught Frida Kahlo how to explore the essence of Mexican identity through self-portraits. The word genius is often used to describe these visionaries, like their abilities are a product of privilege, natural-born talent, or the right alignment of stars. This is simply untrue. Genius is a product of unquenchable curiosity and relentless pursuit. It's inherently human and attainable. The problems we will face in the future, the problems that we face now, will take an unprecedented amount of creativity to solve. So we're going to need a lot more unconventional thinkers. We're going to need a lot more Mavericks. So the question is, how do we instill this type of genius in more of our students? How do we make them a little bit more creative, a little bit more Maverick? It's rooted in books. We need to encourage our students to be voracious readers. Whatever it is that they're trying to accomplish in their lifetime, someone's probably already done it and written about it. The great Otto von Bismarck once said, "Fools say that they learn through experience. I prefer to profit off other people's experience." What Bismarck is saying in this quote is that learning through your own blood, sweat, and tears is incredibly draining and ill-advised. I prefer to learn through other people's experience, and books provide a fantastic resource for this. Warren Buffett, the second wealthiest man on the planet today, said that the best investment he ever made was buying a book by Benjamin Graham in the 1950s. He attributes literally tens of billions of dollars of his net worth to one book. So what is the value of a book that changes your life forever? It's impossible to put a monetary value to that book because it's priceless. The word read has an asterisk in my presentation for a very important reason. Be careful what you read, because not all books are created equal. Some books are entertaining or academic in nature and have no real-world application. Given that choice, read books that have the ability to teach you skills, pragmatic skills that you're going to need to accomplish your goals in the future. The second thing we need to encourage our students to do is to spend more time alone. Today's collaborative work environment with open floor plans and group projects is incredibly misguided. Solitude is crucial to the creative process, and we often see that breakthroughs happen through deep individual introspection. Albert Einstein figured out the theory of relativity while working in the back of a Swiss patent office in 1905, after almost a decade of working on the problem by himself. Dr. Seuss, the famous children's book author, wrote most of his ingenious stories in a lonely bell tower office in La Jolla, California, by himself. It was even said that he was scared to meet the children that read his books for fear that they might not like him. Solitude is powerful, and only as of recently have we begun to forget this fact. The pursuit of mastery in any field continues to be deeply intrinsic and very personal. The third thing we need to encourage our students to do is to internalize this concept of dead time versus alive time. In this world, there's two types of time. There's dead time, when you're just passively waiting for something to happen. And then there's alive time, when you're actively learning and leveraging for some kind of end goal. My favorite example that illustrates this concept is in the life of a criminal named Detroit Red. Detroit Red did a little bit of everything. He ran the numbers, he sold drugs, he stole things, he even moonlighted as a pimp. Unfortunately for Red, he was arrested in 1946 for trying to sell a stolen watch. And to make matters worse, he happened to be carrying a loaded gun with him. So he was sentenced to 10 years in prison. At this critical moment in Detroit Red's life, he was faced with a decision, dead time or alive time. He chose alive time, and he began to learn. It said that the minute that he got to prison, he checked out the dictionary from the prison library, and he devoured it from cover to cover. He read history, philosophy, religion. Detroit Red transcended confinement through the pages that he absorbed. Years after his release, journalists would ask him, "Hey, Detroit, what's your alma mater?" And his one-word response would be books. Prison was his college. Detroit Red would go on to be one of the greatest civil rights activists this world had ever seen. You might know him by his real name, Malcolm Little or Malcolm X. These three principles are merely a starting point from which to gain a better understanding of the world around us. Through formal education, we have effectively created a homogeneous thinking pool that discredits anyone that challenges the existing paradigm. It kind of creates this mob mentality that undermines our ability to think freely. An education bubble looms, and the only way past it is to foster more unconventional thinkers, more Mavericks. Because as Charles Darwin found out during his research in the mid-19th century in the Galapagos, the answer lies in the anomalies. See, to our eyes, Mavericks seem strange and out of place, just like mutations did to Darwin almost 200 years ago. But if we study it closely, we come to realize that their mutation, their unorthodox approach, that's their key to their survival. Thank you.